President Donald Trump's recent announcement of a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, set to go into effect on February 1, 2025, marks a significant escalation in the ongoing trade tensions between the U.S. and China. This move comes on the heels of his previous plan to impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, two of the U.S.'s closest trading partners. These tariffs are part of a broader strategy by Trump's administration to address critical issues, including illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and specifically the rising influx of fentanyl into the United States, which has been a significant cause for concern. The 10% tariff on Chinese goods is just the latest chapter in the evolving trade war, with Trump leveraging tariffs as a tool to force a recalibration of trade imbalances and to push back against what he has described as unfair trade practices by China. The Chinese government, for its part, has responded with considerable alarm, asserting that there are no real winners in a trade war. Their warnings emphasize that tariffs and retaliatory measures would leave all sides worse off, with both economies suffering from higher costs and disrupted supply chains. Chinese officials have been increasingly vocal about the dangers of tariff escalation, highlighting the potential for a destructive cycle of economic hostility that could damage not only the U.S. and China, but the broader global economy. In addition to the China tariffs, Trump has placed a significant focus on North America, particularly in regard to trade with Canada and Mexico. The proposed 25% tariffs on goods from both nations have ignited fierce reactions. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has promised a robust response, stressing that Canada's energy exports play a critical role in the U.S. economy, and that tariffs targeting these goods will harm American businesses as much as they do Canadian ones. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, in a particularly sharp response, has gone so far as to label these tariffs a declaration of war, and has announced a series of retaliatory measures, including a potential boycott of U.S.-made alcohol and targeted actions against products from Republican-held areas in the automotive sector. Volkswagen, a major player in the global automotive industry with significant manufacturing operations in Mexico, has expressed concerns that these tariffs will have a devastating impact on the automotive market, not only in North America, but across the world. The company has raised alarms over the economic consequences, particularly for American consumers, who are likely to see higher prices on cars and parts. Volkswagen's stance is indicative of the broader ripple effects tariffs can have on global supply chains and multinational companies that depend on cross-border manufacturing. On the other side of the world, China has been quietly ramping up its own retaliatory measures. Over the past several months, China has implemented actions that have flown under the radar of much of the mainstream media, but which are nonetheless significant in their potential to escalate the trade conflict further. One of the most consequential measures has been the restriction of exports of rare earth elements to the United States. These critical materials are indispensable in the manufacturing of high-tech products, including electronics, batteries, and military equipment. By curbing the supply of these materials, China has the ability to deal a strategic blow to the U.S. technology and defense sectors, which rely heavily on these rare elements. Moreover, China has begun reducing its oil imports from the U.S., a move that targets another key area of bilateral trade. In retaliation for U.S. tariffs, China has now introduced tariffs that exceed 74.9% on specific American products. These steep duties not only exacerbate the trade imbalance between the two countries, but also send a signal of China's intent to push back against what it sees as economic aggression. Alongside the tariffs on U.S. products, China has widened the scope of its retaliatory measures to include goods imported from the European Union, Japan, and Taiwan. This broadening of tariffs signals China's recognition of the larger global nature of these economic tensions. As the trade conflict continues to unfold, it's essential to look more closely at the specific sectors affected and the potential long-term effects on the global economy. For instance, the U.S. has implemented significant tariff hikes on Chinese-made electric vehicles, EVs. The tariffs on Chinese EV imports, which were initially set at 25%, have now risen to a staggering 100%. The U.S. government justifies this dramatic tariff increase by arguing that Chinese EVs are heavily subsidized by the Chinese government, which allows them to enter the U.S. market at artificially low prices, undermining domestic EV manufacturers like Tesla and Rivian. This move to protect U.S. EV manufacturers is part of a larger effort to strengthen the domestic clean energy sector and promote U.S. production of key technologies. In line with this strategy, the U.S. has also targeted lithium-ion batteries, which are a critical component of electric vehicles, by increasing tariffs from 7.5% to 25%. The rationale behind these measures is twofold. First, to reduce dependency on Chinese suppliers who dominate the global battery market, and second, to foster the growth of domestic battery production. which is essential to the success of the electric vehicle revolution. Additionally, the semiconductor industry has become a focal point in the ongoing trade war, as the U.S. seeks to reduce its dependence on Chinese-made components that are critical for everything from smartphones to military technologies. Tariffs on Chinese semiconductors are set to rise significantly by 2025, increasing from 20.5% to 50%. The aim of these tariff hikes is to incentivize domestic semiconductor production and reduce vulnerabilities in key technology sectors. The semiconductor tariff increases align with the CHIPS Act, which is designed to boost U.S.-based chip manufacturing, ensuring the country remains a leader in semiconductor technology and is not overly reliant on Chinese exports. The medical industry, too, has not been immune to the tariffs. For example, the U.S. is implementing substantial tariff hikes on medical supplies from China, including syringes, needles, and certain types of personal protective equipment, PPE. While these goods were previously tariff-free, tariffs will now climb to 50% by 2024, affecting approximately $18 billion worth of imports. These moves underscore the U.S. government's desire to strengthen domestic manufacturing capabilities in the medical sector, particularly in the wake of supply chain disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. On the European side, the EU has also adopted a firm stance against China's alleged unfair trade practices. Starting in late 2024, the EU began imposing new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, ranging from 7.8% to 35.3%, which effectively raised the highest tariff to 45.3%. This comes in response to an investigation that found Chinese EV manufacturers were benefiting from government subsidies that gave them an unfair advantage in European markets. The EU has also taken action in other sectors, including food and agricultural products, by implementing anti-dumping tariffs to protect its industries from what it considers unfairly priced Chinese imports. Japan and Taiwan have taken more subtle but equally significant steps to counter China's growing economic influence. Japan, which has historically had strong trade ties with China, has been bolstering its industrial policies, particularly in areas like semiconductors, rare earth elements, and critical minerals. Japan's goal is to reduce its dependence on Chinese imports and safeguard its own industrial base from potential disruptions. Taiwan, a key player in the global semiconductor supply chain, continues to explore new economic partnerships to reduce the risks posed by China's increasingly aggressive trade policies. Both nations are also actively seeking to diversify their economic relationships to reduce vulnerabilities in their own economies. At the heart of these escalating trade measures lies a desire by all parties to protect domestic industries from the perceived threat of unfair competition. China, in turn, has moved to implement its own set of retaliatory measures, including imposing provisional anti-dumping tariffs on polyacetyl copolymers, a critical material used in manufacturing components for industries such as automotive, electronics, and medical devices. The tariffs on U.S. exports of polyacetyl copolymers range from 57.2% to 74.9%. indicating that China views American firms as engaging in unfair pricing practices in its market. For major U.S. companies like DuPont, this represents a serious blow, as polyacetyl copolymers are essential for many of the industries that drive the global economy. The tariffs on European and Japanese firms, although slightly lower, are still substantial, and could force these companies to raise prices or lose market share in China. This situation highlights how tariffs not only affect the countries directly involved in the trade dispute, but also have far-reaching consequences for multinational companies operating across borders. The broader impact of these tariffs will extend far beyond the companies directly affected. Industries that rely on polyacetyl copolymers, such as automotive, electronics, and medical equipment manufacturing, will likely face higher production costs, which could lead to increased prices for consumers. As companies struggle to absorb or pass on these costs, the global supply chain is likely to be disrupted, with some sectors turning to alternative suppliers or reshaping their supply chain strategies to mitigate the impact. The escalating trade tensions also pose significant risks to international relations. As countries retaliate with their own tariffs, the cycle of escalation could result in political fallout that extends beyond the economic sphere. The longer these trade wars continue, the greater the risk of destabilizing not only the global economy, but also political alliances and diplomatic relationships. Prolonged trade disputes can exacerbate political animosities and strain cooperation among major global powers, further complicating the task of managing international trade and geopolitics. As the world watches these developments unfold, particularly with Trump's assertive return to the political stage and his focus on aggressive trade policies, the coming months will be crucial in determining the direction of these conflicts. Will countries find a way to negotiate and resolve these disputes through diplomatic channels? Or will the world be locked into a cycle of retaliation that will destabilize the global economic system? At this critical juncture, it's essential for global leaders to prioritize dialogue and negotiation over punitive measures. A balanced approach to trade imbalances, one that focuses on fair practices and economic cooperation, could prevent further escalation and help secure a more sustainable path for international trade. The alternative is a dangerous cycle of retaliatory tariffs, rising costs for consumers, and long-term geopolitical consequences that would harm global prosperity. In conclusion, the tariff wars initiated by Trump's administration, along with retaliatory measures from China and other countries, have the potential to reshape global trade dynamics in profound ways. As these trade tensions continue to escalate, the global community must remain vigilant and seek diplomatic solutions that prioritize economic stability and cooperation. While the path forward remains uncertain, the coming months will be pivotal in determining the future of global trade and the resilience of the world's economies.